Hello and welcome to the Sport Walk Show. It's the middle of winter, but it's one of those glorious sunny winter days up here on the South Downs. But I have to confess, it is absolutely freezing. So we're going to mix it up a little bit, and I'm going to bring you some features from up here on the Downs and some from here in the studio, where it is much, much warmer. But don't worry, because we've got an absolutely packed show, so you won't notice a thing. We've got more of your questions, this time about the usefulness of active zone minutes, and also about taking on multiple challenges in one season. We've got a Trailmaster feature on staying upright when walking on slippery, chalky trails, a feature looking at what we think could be Britain's waymarked trail capital, and a rather lofty, amazing place to walk. But first, a little clarification. In the last show, we discussed whether swinging your arms makes you walk faster, and I explained how it's best to focus on getting all of your power from your legs, not your arms. But this didn't actually answer the question of whether swinging your arms makes you walk faster, which, in fact, it does. Swinging your arms brings more momentum into play, which can make you go faster, but it's not actually the most efficient way to gain speed. And it won't make you go faster than you can otherwise walk with a good walking form, unless, that is, you reach that tipping point where you start to race walk. So yes, technically, swinging your arms will make you go faster, but you don't need to do it, because you can save yourself all of that extra effort simply by developing a good walking technique. Great, that clears that up. On with the show. We've talked a lot in the past about the value of data in helping you progress, but we've had a question asking specifically about active zone minutes and whether it's helpful for sport walking. Well, the answer really needs to come in two parts. Yes and no. Now, in case you don't know what active zone minutes are, let me explain. Active zone minutes is a term used by Fitbit that refers to the amount of time you spend doing heart-pumping activity. Their words, not mine. They also measure active minutes, which relates to lower intensity work, and the two terms together give you a good measure of how energetic you've been, either in a workout or during the day. So far, so good. And it is good. These features have shown themselves to be really helpful in encouraging people to develop more active lifestyles. So whatever we talk about here, let there be no mistake. This stuff is valuable in encouraging people to be more active. But if we're looking at whether this is something to help guide your sport walking progress, development and training, then my advice would be that it has less value, because essentially it encourages and rewards intensity in your workouts. And sport walking is an endurance activity, where the majority of your training needs to take place in lower intensity zones to build endurance. The underlying concept of active zone minutes is nothing new. All good performance watches that measure your heart rate will give you a breakdown of each of your activities in heart rate zones from 1 to 5. They'll list how long you spent operating in each zone and also give you that data as a percentage of your overall session. So you can see that you spent, say, 60% in zone 2, an easy zone, maybe 20% in zone 3, and so on. And this data is really useful, especially for sport walking, because of the objective of walking as efficiently as possible. The higher the intensity of your walking, the quicker you're going to use up your resources. So being able to translate your efforts into clear numbers that show you if you're achieving your aim of walking more efficiently is invaluable. But the risk when data like active zone minutes are turned into an incentive is that they encourage you to train harder than perhaps you should for your specific objectives. It can also lead to trophy hunting, focusing on improving your score rather than simply working in a structured way to a set of pre-planned outcomes. You might also be making false gains for the kind of outcomes you're seeking overall, which is another concern. You could be delighted that you're smashing your active zone minute goals, but the fitness you're building may be unsuited to keeping you strong over a longer, more sustained walk. It's like the difference in fitness between a sprinter and a marathon runner. And I think this is the best way to summarise it really. Incentives like active zone minutes can give you a motivational boost in terms of seeing that you're on the right side of official guidance on activity levels. But they're less beneficial in terms of setting yourself manageable and achievable targets for progress in an endurance activity like sport walking. So my advice would be to use them to understand your exertion level in any given session, but make sure you're looking beyond the headline to see the underlying statistics. Don't get to thinking that a good active zone minute score is the same as having completed a planned session in the right way for you. We've had a question asking how to train for multiple challenge events in one season or year. And this is actually a really good point, because once you've tasted that sense of fulfillment that you get from taking on a sport walking challenge, you're going to want it again and again. But how can you take on multiple challenges in 1 year without overdoing it? Well, it's all down to planning and prioritising. The key to success here is to identify two things: the event or events that are most important to you, and those that represent the toughest physical test. Now, it could be that your most important event is also going to be your hardest, but that's not always the case. It could be that a shorter event, which isn't so important to you, has more demanding terrain and is therefore a tougher challenge physically, albeit for a shorter duration. So consider both the importance and difficulty of the challenge. Now, it is quite tricky to explain simply how to juggle multiple challenges with differing goals in one season. But the one thing you must do is prioritise. You first need to prioritise the event or events that matter the most to you, where you want to do really well. And then you also need to give respect to any others that represent a tough physical test. The most important thing for you to do is to plan your training so that you peak for your most important challenge, not just the first challenge that year. So if perhaps you've got a shorter challenge lined up a month or two before a big challenge that's really important to you, you need to structure your training to peak for the important challenge, not the first shorter challenge. This means that you'll need to treat the first one as a part of your training build-up, and so you'll need to adjust your challenge pace accordingly so that you don't go too fast and deplete your reserves. But getting the build-up to your important challenge right is only half of it. Once that's done, everything you do in training is about maintenance, about not losing the fitness and sharpness you've gained in the build-up to that event. So the weeks or months between your important event and any others you're taking on shouldn't be seen as core training time. It should be seen as maintenance, preserving the fitness you've already gained and carrying it through to the next test. Think of it as keeping your fitness, strength and sharpness ticking over, rather than training yourself to become faster and stronger for the next challenge. You want to be focusing on making progress and improvements before your big challenge. And after that, you're simply preserving what you've gained. You can look to make further improvements over the next winter, ready for the following season, and so on. Personally, I wouldn't take on more than 2 100-kilometre events in any one season, unless you're an experienced sport walker. But you could take on a mixture of different distances, providing you can space them out enough to give your body time to recover. And that really is key to all of this. After a major challenge, you need to give your body at least 2 to 3 weeks of recovery before returning to structured training for your next event. And that really is about all you need to know to take on multiple events in one season. Just remember, Identify your most important events and train to peak for the first of these, even if it means going easier in a challenge earlier in the year. Remember that recovery after challenge is more important than training for the next one. If you get your recovery wrong, you won't be able to train effectively for the next challenge. View the time between challenges as being all about maintaining and preserving the fitness, strength and resilience that you develop during your training for your first important event, not about building more fitness and more strength. Most importantly though, be honest with yourself at every stage. It's fine to do multiple events in one season, but if you overdo it, you could put yourself back months or even longer. Listen to your body and defer an event to the following year if you don't feel 100% recovered and ready to go again.
When you're out on the trail, you encounter all sorts of different surfaces underfoot, from soil to grass to sand to bedrock. But there's one surface that demands more respect than others, and that's chalk. But chalk's reputation as a bit of a slippery character when wet is a little bit misleading. So in this iteration of Trailmaster, we're going to look at different chalk conditions and what you need to look out for. Now, before we get into this good chalk, bad chalk business, I should stress that the very nature of chalk, being a densely packed, generally smooth and super hard surface, means that you should always be a little wary when walking on it in the wet. And you should also show it respect, but you shouldn't fear it or be overcautious if you know what to look for. You see, many people just see chalk and assume it's going to be ice rink slippery, which is a mistake. The simplest and easiest way to tell if the chalk that you're approaching is likely to be treacherous is to look at the colour. Hang on a minute, I hear you all cry, it's chalk, it's going to be white. Not so, concerned viewer, not so. The chalk you encounter on the trail will vary in consistency and purity. If it's a little grey-brown, then the chalk is mixing with soil, even though the chalk itself may still be predominant. In this case, the soil colouring the chalk will more often than not be making the surface more gritty, and the chalk is likely to be looser, which adds to the grip. So on the whole, not a lot to worry about with greyish-brownish chalk, assuming that you're still approaching it with a sense of caution. Likewise, those bands of pure white chalk are also, generally speaking, safe. The surface is clean, given its pure white colour, and while I'd never say throw caution to the wind, you can generally expect to have some grip because the surface is clean. The colour you need to look out for in chalk on the trail, and to avoid underfoot, is green. This is where chalk deserves its reputation for slipperiness, because the green you see is a thin coating of an algae-like substance, and this really will have you slipping around like some kind of cartoon animal. Now, we have tried researching to find out what this green substance actually is, but without any luck. But really, truly, it doesn't matter what it is. All that matters is that it's slippery as f***. The combination of the hard-packed chalk and this organic covering truly do make the trails lethal, especially on descents, so it's really important to keep a laser focus on the colour and condition of the trail when you're walking. You're most likely to encounter green chalk in deeply shaded areas or north-facing trails where there's little airflow and a lot of moisture, rather like where I am at the moment. Although I have to say, having trudged up a very steep, very long hill with all the camera gear, all the chalk that we found is rather beautifully white. Chalk is also more likely to become exposed from under topsoil or grass where there's a high footfall. So very popular routes might see sections where there's a lot of chalk exposure, more so than remote, lightly used paths. So to recap, grey or brownish coloured chalk means that there's some soil in there somewhere, and that means there's likely to be more of a gritty surface and some grip, although still approach with care. Pure white chalky trails usually mean that the chalk is clean and without any organic covering, so again, approach with care, but you should have some grip as long as you're placing your feet well. If it's green, show the trail the utmost respect. Try to avoid stepping on green chalk, especially when descending, and if you're faced with a large band of hard, smooth green chalk and the trail is wet, find another way around. Don't risk it. As with all potentially slippery surfaces, chalk or otherwise, making sure your centre of gravity is right is very important. So if you're descending and you suspect the trail may be slippery, lean forwards, as this will put your weight over your feet. There are many good aspects of chalk, not least the fact that it's firm underfoot, so try not to turn it into your arch nemesis. As long as you have a healthy respect for it in any condition and adopt a zero tolerance approach to green chalk, then you should always remain the right way up. If I were to ask you which town or city in the UK has the greatest collection of waymarked trails, either running out of it or through it, you'd probably say something like Sheffield or Fort William or some other great adventure centre. So you may be a little surprised to learn that it could actually be Winchester. Yes, this cathedral city, famed the world over, with its Gothic architecture, King Arthur's Round Table hanging in the castle, and its historic college, could well be the waymarked trail capital of the UK. You see, Winchester has no fewer than 7,
Make that 8, we found another one.
major waymarked routes, either starting or finishing there, or running through the centre of the city. The most famous route is the South Downs Way, 100 miles of glorious downland trails running between Winchester and Eastbourne. But there are some equally glorious and challenging routes as well. There's St Swithin's Way, leading to Farnham in Surrey and linking up with the North Downs Way. There's Allen King Way, leading to the Roman fort of Pontcysyllte Castle near Portsmouth. There's the Itchen Way, the Three Castles Path, St James's Way, which is part of the Camino de Santiago route, the Pilgrims Trail, Clarendon Way linking Salisbury to Winchester, and of course the South Downs Way itself. If you broaden your search area a little to include the greater Winchester area, then you can also add the Spaghetti Squiggle, that is the Monarch's Way through Twyford, and the Oxgrove Way, which skims past Winchester services on the M3. But I don't want to cheat here, it's what's going on in the city centre that really matters. And this is where we've not been able to find another town or city from our research that has as many waymarked trails, either running in or out of it, or through it. One factor seems key to Winchester collecting so many signed routes: the cathedral. There are pilgrimage routes, routes linking Winchester to other cathedral cities, or linking up to other pilgrimage routes elsewhere. Then you have the natural landscape, with routes hugging rivers and crossing the South Downs. Whatever the motivation for creating any of these individual routes, the result is a city where your sport walking options are practically boundless. In fact, it is possible to walk all of the trails in one go with the help of a few linking paths. And this is one fabulous way to celebrate the trail riches on offer here, to walk all the waymarked trails in and around Winchester in one single challenge route. It's such a good idea, in fact, that we've actually published such a route on OS Maps, and you can find it at the link in the comments below this video. It starts and finishes at the cathedral, so you've got one of the most impressive trailheads you could imagine. But the thing is, we don't actually know for sure that Winchester really does have the greatest collection of waymarked trails in the UK. So, if you know of a town or city that has more than 7 waymarked routes,
Make that 8, we found another one.
running through it or out of it, let us know in the comments below and we'll investigate. I'm walking a short stretch of the Offa's Dyke path, but this historic national trail isn't my pick for an amazing place to walk. No, it's this. This is the Pontcysyllte Aqueduct, and I'm going to take you across it. Now I'm going to put up some information at the end with all the cool details about how high it is. Let's see if you can still hear me with the wind up here. When it was built, all this stuff. I just want you to soak up what it means to be up here on the aqueduct. It is just remarkable. If I just stop a second, look across, there's a viaduct. This part of Wales is just full of ducts. Some aqua, some via, but all are just stunning. And if we look over the other side of the canal, you're looking west towards Snowdonia, and there's a buzzard flying gracefully above us. Anyway, the rain's come in, so I'm going to press on. So if I move out a little bit, you see we are quite high now. And any minute we're going to cross the river. And that is where it really does get spectacular. This is the River Dee. It's an iconic river in this part of Wales, and it runs right through the heart of Llangollen. And if we catch a glimpse on the other side, it's quite difficult because you've got the canal right next to you, but then you can see the Dee on the other side. And as we go a bit further on, there's a bridge which offers a fantastic vantage point to look back up at this remarkable aqueduct. Once you get used to the fact of the height and what seems like a really perilous drop on the other side, you can become quite comfortable being up here, and it just is a great place to hang out. Dangerous times, don't fly too high. So we've come down underneath the aqueduct now. Get right, literally right underneath it. In fact, you can touch the stone columns, and it really does tower over you quite magnificently. And what's good about this as an amazing place to walk is you've got choices. You can either go across the aqueduct on the Pontcysyllte path, and you can just follow it all the way along through Llangollen and out the other side, or you can just follow that stretch as your means of getting across the river, and then you can come down and explore these little bits of single track, some of which are quite precipitous and end very suddenly, going off into nothing but whitewater turmoil. But then you've got other trails that just lead through the woods, crying out to be explored. For me though, I just wanted to show you this magnificent beast because until you actually come here and not only stand at the foot of it, I'll turn that way because you can see the column there, stand at the foot of it and look up, but also until you actually walk across, it's very difficult really to picture just what an impression it makes on you. And it is quite some impression. Okay, so I've just found a little place where I can get down to the river. This is clearly somewhere used by people angling. Possibly some paddlers might use it as a place to get out, although this is not a good position on the river to do that. But it just really does illustrate. First of all, I think it's important to say the beauty of this aqueduct, but also the scale of it. Just take a look at this and the people walking along the top. Okay, time to turn around, I think. Now I've got further to go, but I'm going to leave you with one last trip across this remarkable structure.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world but keep the sky on your mind.
Well, that's it for this show. If you've got any questions about the topics we've covered, then leave a comment. And if you'd like us to answer one of your questions in a future show, then ask away in the comments as well. If you want to learn more about sport walking, then make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you're on Facebook, then do come over and join our community group on there. Likewise, if you're on Strava, join our Strava club and get support from other club members when you share your walks. And lastly, we've had a lot of interest in our Get Fit walking series, so if you know anyone who's looking to do something about their fitness and who likes walking, make sure you point them in our direction. But for now, enjoy your sport walking, and I'll see you again very soon for another edition of the Sport Walk Show.